All right, we're back. We are COMP1006. That is Intro to Web, and in the winter 2017 semester, and it's week 13, second last week of school, part one of our broadcast. We're doing an exam review today, and let's talk about the lovely things we've learned this semester with, and definitely not JavaScript, or not this either. Hold on a second. No click me button. Right? I know it's crazy. It's moving from one technology to the next. We were really talking about, a couple things. We used Composer last week too, which is kind of weird. But I want to kind of, review what we've done here. I'm not going to create another document today. I'm not going to go and create wet lesson 13. I just want to review lesson 12 a little bit. Because lesson 12, we did a lot of stuff. So things we know. We know that PHP is an embedded language. You guys should know that by now. You should know how PHP embeds in HTML, right? Those kind of simple things, okay? So when it comes to things like your index.php, this is where we get a little hairy. And I mean, it's almost like we need to do a little haircut here. I'll tell you why, right? If you talk to the people in the other classes at all who are taking PHP, Rich does things slightly different than me. But at the end of the day, what I'm doing here is creating a routing system. That's all I've been doing here, right? So where I check to see if we're using the super global variable to check if the page ID has been set. And if that's true, then we send the person home, right? If it's not set, we send them home. If it has been set, then we do a switch statement to check to which page it is. That's all I'm doing here. So first I'm checking, hey, did I set this page ID in the super global variable get? And how do I get the get? Because it's in the URL. URL is where I'm getting the information, right? That's what's happening here when we switch. So this switch case statement that we're using is switching which page is going to show up. That's what we're doing here. Will this be on your exam? This kind of page structure? Maybe. Will I start you off with from scratch and get you to do whole page structure by yourself? No, that's like a waste of time. We only have an hour and a half because Adam's got to go, right? Just saying, right? Got to blame somebody, right? So Adam can't spend 3 hours with us, so we can't just push him over into B230, which means we got to end our exam exactly right at 5, which means you only have 2 hours, right? Which means I got to gauge it for 2 hours, which means that the exam is going to be super damn easy, right? Because I only have 2 hours to give you, right? I got to gauge the exam for the time frame that I have. I can't push this into B230 because it would be unfair to Adam, right? And other people like him who don't come to B230, right? So I'm just saying that's just the way it's going to be.
If it makes it easier, I'm okay with that.
I know. But that's just the way, because the scheduling I'm talking about, not because he doesn't feel like coming. I know he loves me. It's not about that. It's just that he's got other things going on, and not just him, but other people too. I'm just using Adam as an example, and I apologize. Hallelujah, Adam, before this, Easter Sunday coming up, right, for us Christians, right? I just can say that it's a bad thing, and I apologize in advance. I'm on the cross. Okay. But when it comes to that's how it is, man. I'm an offensive kind of guy, right? So I offend everybody equally. But anyways, at the end of the day, what do they call that? They call that a curmudgeon, right? Guy who hates everybody equally. Anyways, but no, I'm joking. What I mean by this is that I can't make it 3 hours. That's the reality. All joking aside, I can't do it because it's not fair to the people who have rescheduled. This is a weird class where we have a 2 hour and a 1 hour. And for the most people, there's a lot of people that only spend 2 hours here in class between 3 and 5. So therefore, I have to gauge my exam for that. It's just how it's going to be. So that means it's going to be a 120-minute exam or 110 minutes, whatever it is, because we have to upload everything by the end of the day, right? So that's the format, 110 minutes. 110 minutes means I cannot make you build a file from scratch. I cannot make you connect to a database on your own. I got to give you a database like I did the last time. That's what's going to happen. It's coming, all right? Because if I did that, it would just be too difficult. In fact, if I make you connect to a database, that means the database is already there with the tables you need to connect to. That's reality. That's what's coming, okay? So anything you hook into, any kind of data you have to manipulate is going to be on the database table itself. You don't have to create any data or any of that stuff because this class is not a MySQL class. You have another class for that, right? This class is PHP, right? You're learning PHP and server-side scripting. Really, that's what you're doing here, okay? How about templating? Will there be templating in partials? Absolutely. You can bet your money on it that there'll be partials and templating the way we've been doing it here. So things like your views folder. And will I make you break it down into models, views, and controllers? Yes, chances are that we've talked about it all second half of semester. Why the heck wouldn't I put it on there? So chances are it's going to be there, right? That means that inside your partials folder, you should expect to work with footer, header, and navbar. That's just the way it is, right? Can I break this out anymore? Maybe I might ask you to break it out some other way, right? But at the end of the day, the concept behind breaking your files out into partials is something that you're going to need to do, okay? Definitely, you're going to make it a live site. You're definitely going to have to put it up on GitHub. Those things are required, right? So GitHub, some live site, whether it's Heroku, Azure, DreamHost, whatever supports PHP, you can use. I don't care as long as I get it, right? So those are the things, because your live host is worth 4 points. GitHub is worth 4 points. That's 8 points that you're going to get just for that. So do that first, like we did last time. Get all that stuff going. Your structure, your page structure. If I get you to restructure something or set things up in a certain way, it's going to be there. Am I going to get you to do heavy-duty CSS? Hell no. It's going to be Bootstrap, right? Because this is not a CSS course. So you can expect that that's not going to be something we're dealing with. Or JavaScript of any kind, right? You're not going to do that. So what can I do? I'm going to make you protect the page. Definitely. You're going to have to do your own security. 100%. You're going to probably have to do your login and make your login and registration pages work. Okay, I'm not saying you may have the HTML part, you may not have to worry about that part. But your login and registration pages, you got to activate somehow. You have to know how to do that whole piece. You're going to have to know how to do hashing and rehashing of passwords. You know, so password hash, password verify. That's going to be on the exam. We talked about that. And it's important to have, passwords that are not clear text. Okay, so those things are going to be on the exam, right? Now we've broken things out into controllers and content. So this first part up here, this assets, config. The config piece is the database piece, right? There's not a lot of stuff here that we're going to cover. We're not going to change anything in here, right? This part here, we're not going to change this piece. So you might get database.php exactly like this. It may not have Dasha in the username, right? But it still worked. Thank you, Dasha. All semester, you're such a good sport, right? See, I didn't get hung on the cross for that, Alex. Okay, you know what I'm saying? All right, thanks, buddy. All right, and then so we got this, the content app.css. That's not changing. Controllers. When it comes to email, games, and users, will I have email? No, that's not going to be an email controller. I'm not going to make you make a page that sends through SendGrid unless it's a bonus. All right. So will you be required to do it? No. Will I give it as a bonus? Maybe. Right. Which means take a look at that code. You have access to it anyway, but you have to figure all that out, how to make it all work. And if you can make it work in the 2-hour period, hallelujah. Right. We'll get that too. Games. Games is the database that I'm going to be rendering, for so far for lesson 12, but for the final exam, it probably would be something else, right? You might have some other thing that you're going to build, right? How about other things? How about other kinds of things we haven't covered? Like, for example, if I ask you to do something randomly, because usually I'm a gaming kind of guy, and I want you to do some random stuff, right? So we'll ask you to do something random with the random part of the random PHP, maybe, right? But then I'll probably give you the code because I haven't talked about it, right? I might say, here, use this function. I already pre-wrote this function, use it. That I might do, right? And then press this button, and when this button is pressed, do this, right? That might come up, right? So you're going to access the database, for sure. You're going to protect the pages in the database, for sure. You're going to do full CRUD on the database, for sure. That's all the stuff you need to do, right? All the HTML and the PHP to support you will be there, right? So you won't have to, create new HTML pages, or the structure of the pages will be all created for you. Why? Because we have no time, right? The only thing you may have to do in those pages is inject PHP where required. So for example, I don't know, I might have the edit button or the cancel button or the delete button, and you have to know how to change those buttons to what I'm asking you to do, right? That's it. Okay, there might be something like that. It could be user management that I ask you to do. I could say something like, okay, make a database of users, and you do full user management. That might be the thing I get you to do, right? So there might be that portion of things. But at the end of the day, I'm just trying to give you hints. There's going to be some kind of a breakout of controller and views. Controller is where all the logic is going to be. So an example, this is not a great one. Let's do the games controller for a second. Here's where we have the controller itself is a bunch of functions, right? If you notice, that return something or do something. So here's an example of read games, this part of the games controller, where it connects to the database, selects everything from the database, from the games table, right? We execute the query, and then we return the result of that query back to the calling function. You will have to write this stuff, right? Which means, but you can access GitHub, and you can look at it and go, whoa, he wants me to do this. He's already given me this. So that means I have to do this. That's what you should be able to do at this point. If you can't do those simple things, right? Do I expect you to remember, any of that stuff, like how to connect to the database or any of that stuff? No, because in real life, we would never expect you to remember. You would have example code somewhere that you would use. I just want you to use the code that I've given you, right? That's all I want you to do at this point. That's why it's called Intro to Web. Yes?
Will you want any buttons to run functions?
Yeah, maybe. But if I do, it's going to be, like I said, you'll be functions that you pass in from the controllers. Why? Is that a problem?
Because I've been trying, like, on a button, previously we've done it, like, run to a page that has that, like, for the delete, our delete button doesn't run a function delete, it page.
Does it though? Let's take a look at that. So the question is, will I make you run something on a button to run a PHP script? And the answer is, we kind of do that, right? So if I look at the views for the button, so let's take a look at the list. Here's our list. So this is a good example of a list view, right? My list view has a for each loop, and in the for each loop, I have a couple of buttons, right? So one of the buttons is this delete button. Here's the delete button. But the delete button actually takes you to a page, index.php, page ID is game delete, right? But there is no game delete page, right? Because delete happens in the controller, right? What happens is, well, hold on. What happens is, if you go to my index.php, right? Index.php is the routing, right? So it comes in here, it looks at game delete, right? If I can find it. So I look through here. So, okay, I'm trying to delete. Is there a game delete? Oh, here it is. And what do I do with this thing? I set the title, which we don't need. And then here's the template string, which is views games delete.php. Template string delete.php in my views games. Okay, cool. And then down in here, I get my header and my nav bar, and then I put my template string in, and I'm going to go views delete, right? So views games delete. Here's delete PHP. And then the only thing this thing does, right, it includes the users controller, it includes the database, it includes the games.php, and then it performs the delete game. So you may have to do something like that, but I wouldn't make you do anything other than this.
I was asking if there's a way to just hit the button instead of going to a different file.
Sure there is.
Delete it. I was asking if that's something that you want on this.
You can do it. Should you do it is the question, right? And in this particular case, the way we set up our application structure, the answer is no, right? But could you do it? Yeah, sure. You can make the button do whatever you want. I mean, it's just accessing a page, right? And when I access a page with a button, depending on how I get there, if I go with an href, what kind of request am I sending? There's two types of requests we've been working with all semester. What are the two types of requests? You should know. Get and post, right? So what type of request am I making when I'm using a href? What is that? What is it? Get, right? The only time I can do a post is through a form, right? Which means I can't do that unless my button's actually in a form. So if I put a delete button in its own form, make a post, click the button, and then make it go do a post, then I can do some kind of processing. It's possible, but would I ever code it that way? Probably not, right? Right. So chances are I'm going to make it go to a kind of URL. I'm going to access some PHP code through a GET request, right? And then we'll do something with that, which means it's going to be on the URL. It's going to appear on the URL. Yeah.
What kind of technology are you using Facebook or YouTube, when you make a comment and you hit comment, and it just automatically pops down on the page.
Data binding. That's called data binding. And Facebook uses React. That's a front-end technology, front-end framework, right? So what they use one-way data binding in React so that it injects stuff from the database. It actually reloads that page, that part of the page, through Ajax, right? Whereas if I'm using something like WordPress, right? So we're going to go that way. WordPress is a PHP backend, right? But in Facebook's part, it may not be backend. It might be a Mongo database or something else on the backend, right? It may not be PHP, right? So what else? So ASP.NET is something else. In the summertime, I don't know if I will teach you. Somehow, my name is still on there. But if you guys are with me on COMP1007, which you probably won't be, right? Because that's like a couple summers from now. Not this summer, but maybe next summer, right? If you ever go to that place where you do ASP.NET, and it's kind of funny because you guys do intro to, or RAD, rapid application development, and then not the summer after, but 2 summers after, you do C# again, like way afterwards, and you've forgotten all your C# by then, right? Which is something we're working to change so that there's more progression. Okay. How about this? What does this part do? I mean, it says redirect to page. So header is something you need to know about. How to put a redirect. You have to be able to do headers. You have to know what the difference is between including once and including. What's the difference between included and require? Anybody remember? Why do I need to? What's right? If it requires and it fails, the whole application will stop. Right? If it can include it though, even if it fails, it's going to keep going. Right? Which means we'll have all these weird errors on our screen. Right? So you want to use require to stop the application completely if it's something critical, like a critical failure. Right? We want to stop the application. A good example of require would be a database access. Yeah.
When would we use include over and include once?
If we don't care if it's included over and over again. For example, if I include once, I only want to include my database connection one time.
Yeah.
Right? If I access it again and I try and redo my database connection, I'm reopening something that's already open, which can cause an error. Right? So that's why I don't want to do that. Almost never.
Yeah.
I always, chances are for control, I use a lot of include once because I almost never want to reload that stuff again, right? Unless I'm loading a page, I'm reloading a page that I've already loaded, right? As an example, because I'm actually calling PHP from the page itself. I'm kind of reloading or reposting back to that page, doing a post back, right? Which we've done a couple times, right? Whenever we do postbacks, if I only include once that page for whatever reason, then that'll never load the bottom part again because I've only included it once. So then there I would use an include, but we haven't done that here. Right? So include and require, those are the 2 reasons. You should know the difference. I may ask you to do an include. I may ask you to require. You should know the syntax is the same, right? Those things are the same thing. So that's the whole delete, the whole CRUD thing. You should know how to rebalance this. If I give you this code and said, okay, I got this code, but now I want you to access this database and do it like this, and this column is going to be slightly wider or different or whatever, and I need this kind of information. You should be able to basically take a the basic structure here and use it and create your application the way you want, right? I mean, I'm not going to make it so extreme because of Adam. I got to blame Adam because got to blame somebody, right? Adam, I'm joking. Because we only have 2 hours, right? We can't make it so complex. And even if I have the extra hour, sometimes, I mean, I'm not testing you. It's not gonna be a crazy test. It's just gonna be the ability for you to know how to do the major thing, which is authentication, protecting pages. So example of this would be, how do I protect my list page, right? Well, if you look at my list page, this page itself, this PHP page, I'm requiring once, so including once, my controllers, right? Here's my controller, my user's controller. And then I'm checking authentication. Here's where I have require and include. Here's a question. Could I make this require and include? Good, right? Sometimes they're interchangeable, depending on what you want them, right? We really want to use require when, if you don't get it, then you want to shut things down. That's why I put it there, right? But then again, if I can't get my users, then I might as well shut things down too. So I might as well use a require there too, right? So I check authenticated. This check authenticated method exists because I've included my user's PHP file. That's the only reason why I can access this check if authenticated method. It's my custom method that I wrote, right, when I created that controller's users file, right? So here, if you look at my check authenticated method, it returns true if, as an example, I'm authenticated. If I'm not, it redirects me, right? So either I'm going to get true or I'm going to get redirected. There is no other option with my check authenticated method, right? And this is what redirects you. So it checks to see if you're logged in. If you're logged in, great. That means you've been authenticated. That's the assumption. Otherwise, you're not redirected back to the login, which is what this does. So there's the header again, redirect, right? We use the index.php, the whole routing system. We pulled that out because, why? Because it's easier for us to look at it from the root level, right? Remember we did this before where we had to swim through and change the server and da-da-da. Those are things that's the problem when we use partial files, right? We had to move away from doing PHP the way we did it before in the beginning, and then we moved into using partial files where we had to change the routing so that the main file or index.php was our main entry point, and everything else came from there. So whenever you go to our site now, and if I was going to run this thing, let's see if I'm even running. I am. If I'm running my local host here, and if I go to here, and in my lesson 11, which I'm guessing would be probably somewhere down in here. Let's see. That's lesson 12. That's fine. Lesson 12. So if I go here as an example, right, and when I go about or contact, right, here's my crazy contact page that we made with SendGrid, right, and I go to log in, and if I log in for the first time, notice that I got this welcome Tom thing. I may get you to do that. I mean, it's something that's already there. Here's my dashboard, right, where we get the little funky icon. Hey, will I get you to use icons from Font Awesome? Yeah, probably. I might ask you for select an icon of your choice. Who cares, right? That's not a big deal. Chances are, though, any kind of HTML or CSS stuff, I won't ask you. No time, right? So I click games list. This games list itself is protected, right? So notice my page ID is equal to games list, right? But I'm still starting with my index.php. So index.php, and then page ID is equal to game list. What if I took this index.php part off and I did this? Would it still work?
Yeah.
Right? Why? Why would it still work?
It automatically loads in.
That's right. So this would work. This is just a pattern that we're looking at, right? And if I look at the pattern, and if this pattern matches one of my switch case statements, we're good to go, right? I'm putting in index.php just because. But if you notice, a lot of times what we get is a / and some kind of pattern on the top, and that's enough, right? Okay, so here's our games list. When I want to edit, again, I'm checking to see if I'm authenticated, right? It's happening. And now I'm not only getting my page ID, but I'm combining my page ID with the ampersand, with my game ID. And that's something that we have to do. Why am I doing that? Because I'm passing two pieces of information now. One of them is my game details, the page that I'm going to, this one. And the other one is the game ID that I want to pass into my game details page. And how we handled that last time, just as a refresher, is if we go back to my index.php page, which of course is not there. Let's go to here. Here's my index.php page. And if I look at my game details page, so if I go back to game details, I check. I say, well, okay, cool. If I'm here, that means game details has been selected. Cool. Well, what if my game ID is equal to 0? So I don't have a game ID. Well, then I'm adding a game, right? Else, I'm editing the game. That's one of the two things I'm doing, adding or editing. And then I'm going to go back to my details page. So depending on what my title is, add game or edit game, that's a good hint of what's happening here. Okay, cool. Now let's go to my PHP page, my details.php page. And that's inside my views, games, area there. So if I go to my views, my script, it says, okay, cool. Check to see if you're authenticated, Tom. Cool. make sure you have my games controller in place so I can access all of my game functions. That's what this does. It makes this, it kind of includes it in here, right? And then I check. I say, well, my game ID is actually equal to my super global variable game ID. It didn't get cleared, right? So if I come here and I have a variable that's not 0, right? That means it's something else, right? Then I'm going to get game by ID. I'm going to load the game into my form. That's what I'm doing here because I'm editing now, right? I could have as easily switched out, the title, right? Because I'm getting a title from my option as well. I mean, my title is being loaded in here, right? But I'm not going to do that here. I'm just looking for game ID, right? So if it's 0, then I know that my game is null. There is no game I'm loading. Is addition, I'm just using this as addition method if it's true or false. I could have made this a Boolean instead of a 1 or a 0. True, false, 1, 0, same thing, right? Yes?
Do you know why, I was having an issue with this, but it was just, it turned one of them to string, of course, keeping it as an integer, and it just wouldn't go through properly.
That's unusual. Shouldn't have that.
Lock a variable.
There's no way of locking a variable in PHP. That's one of the biggest problems of PHP, right? Just like one of the biggest problems of JavaScript, right? You can assign JavaScript the same variable. Let's say I make a variable name called Thomas, right? Thomas. I'm looking at you, buddy, because just right. This guy here in the white shirt, or kind of the striped shirt. I don't know, right? White stripe, white. I don't know. Anyways, white textured striped shirt. That one. Okay. So let's suppose the Thomas variable, $Thomas, right? I assign to a string of some kind. My name is Thomas, right? And then right away afterwards, I say Thomas is equal to 1. You can do that, right? Because PHP is flexible. It's dynamic, right? It's also ugly that way. Remember I told you there's certain things I don't like about PHP? That is definitely one thing I hate about PHP. The ability for you to assign it to any variable you want, right? Which is a problem. Can you stop it from happening? Yes, you can do that with something called type hinting in PHP 7. So if you ever look that up, so if I say PHP type hinting, right? It's not the same as strict typing, okay? But what it does is I wonder if this is the right place. What it does is you can kind of assign types, kind of, right, to a variable. And then it'll tell you, hey, this is wrong, right? That's all it'll do. It won't stop you, right? So here's an example of a private static type hints object, which is an array of type hints. Here we go. So we have Boolean, and then is bool, and then integer is int, and so on. And my daughter's asked me to go to a party, and I'm going to say no, right? I'm on the cross again. All right. Anyway, so so then we got all this stuff going on where you can see that they've given an example of how to check to see if the type hinting is working. Now, this is not a great piece of documentation here, but what we're trying to do here is, and again, these are all questions in the documentation about type hinting. That's what it says. People often ask about scalar basic type hints, and then it tells you how to do it, right? A drop-in class about how to do type hints. But that's not what I'm looking for. Type hinting is something that we can put together in PHP. Now it says, look, there's some good or bad practice. But typically what I like to do with type hinting is I like to add it in when I'm using a framework like Laravel, like CodeIgniter, like one of those frameworks I talked about, right? In the real world, we would always use something like that. I probably would never run PHP, by itself these days, right? And the reason for that is because it's hard, right? And there's a lot of scaffolding involved with when we use Laravel. Adam, you said you were going to thinking about using Laravel. Did you use it for your final project?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it hard?
Right. It's a lot of new learning. But
Sure.
It's really useful once you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of scaffolding too. You can actually create pages and create stuff from scratch, right? So you make a command on the command line, also bam, there's stuff that it just creates stuff for you. But the problem is, okay, now that I got this, what the hell do I do with it? That's the problem, right? And that's the problem with all scaffolds. Any kind of area where you can kind of a generator that generates your code for you. It's fantastic to scaffold out your skeleton really quickly for your application. The problem is you have to look at it and go, so what does this do now? Oh yeah, it links here and it connects there, and then this does this, and then now it does user authentication this way, and it does, I don't know, assigning variables this way and passing data this way, and it, you have to learn a whole framework, and it's really sometimes depending on the framework you're using. Again, it can be really strict, right? And Laravel is one of those. It's not going to give up, eh? Anyways, she's going to kill me later. Makes sense. So that's what we can use strict typing, but for the most part, there is no type in using PHP. And same thing goes with JavaScript. If you want to compare to JavaScript, classic JavaScript or traditional JavaScript, ECMAScript 5 and before, there isn't really any type hinting or typing. Even ECMAScript 6, the latest version of JavaScript that's been official, there's no typing necessarily. They've just included classes for the first time. They never had the class keyword in JavaScript, but still they're not, kind of using that. And the reason for this is because those languages, when they first started off, you look at the history of of PHP and JavaScript, they were dynamic languages that allowed you them to be embedded anywhere in HTML to basically create behavioral effects, right? One language on the front end, JavaScript, and the other language on the back end, PHP, especially for things like validation. All right, that's what they were used for. Okay, so they wanted the developers wanted these languages to be flexible. But you know what they say with flexibility? It's like giving somebody a lot of rope. You can hang yourself with it, right? It's really bad, right? Because if you're too flexible, there's a lot of bugs in your code, and it's hard because PHP doesn't complain sometimes. It'll say everything's great, and you're like, what happened? I don't get anything on the command line. There's nothing that's wrong. I get nothing in my browser that tells me something's wrong. Okay, now I got to set up some debugging. I got to actually print stuff out to the screen to see if I'm getting the value that I'm supposed to get back, right? Which is bad. That's a lot of work to do just to debug. And that's why people have moved away from PHP slowly to things like ASP.NET on the back end, right? And Node, which is slowly on I would say it's on the rise. The fastest rising back end would be Node.js, right? Because you have Node or JavaScript on all sides, in the front, in the back, and even on the database. All right, that's enough theory. Let's go back to review. All right, so this is what we've done here with our details page, right? We also set up a custom error page, and the way we did the custom error page is again through our index.php page. How do we know this? Because okay, we're searching for a page, right? Here's how the page works, and I'm doing a switch case, and I come to the bottom where somehow I don't find any other page. So if I don't find something, I'm going to get a 404. So no page is found. Direct them back to the 404. Now the 404 is good and it's bad. It's good because it's a nice page that says, man, I don't know what you're looking for here. You're coming to the wrong place. On the downside, it hides your errors, right? So that's a problem. So turn it off is what I'm saying. When you can't find a page, you want to find some errors, turn that 404 page off, this default. You don't have to have a default case. Just comment it out and see what happens. And if I was going to show you this, so let's say I wanted to comment out the default case, I could do that by using multi-line comments here. So there is no default case now. All right, so I'm going to save. I'm going to go back out to my page. So let's go back to here, edit, and I'm going to go home. And let's type in some weird, kind of thing. So I'm going to go to there, right? Now it's going to do one of these, right? However, even though this is bad and looks really ugly, right? Sometimes it gives us more code hinting than if I do my custom 404 page, right? So it's okay to turn it off to do this sometimes, then turn it back on again. Now this is some bad stuff. Here's some really bad things. Why is this really, really bad? This line right here. It's hugely bad for security, man. I'm telling you what version of PHP I'm running, which means you can check to see my security holes. If I haven't patched them up, you can attack me, right? Same thing with Apache. You can check my Apache version and attack me that way, right? And you know what port I'm on here too, yeah.
Also, Canadian Tire, when they released the new website, I tried typing in something into their keywords, and I constantly got that page.
Bad, right? That's really bad, right? So you should always make a catch-all. That's why I made it a default. The default itself catches all the errors. It's going to give you a 404. but it's also going to hide errors. So guys, I'm telling you in ahead, when you're going to do some debugging, turn the 404 page off, then put it back in again, right? So that way, when your page is working, so you want to see this error sometimes, right? All right, so let's go back here. So I mean, the 404 page is one thing, but this, you know what I put in here, you know what you're getting, and this is what I want to see. Sometimes you just get a 404 page, right? So if I put it back, just to give you an example of that. So I'm putting it back the way it was. If we go back to that page, right? So if I go back to this page again, and here's my PHP page, and I type in this stuff, I'm just going to get a 404 page, right? Well, when it works. Did I save it? All right, I broke it now. All right. Let's refresh. How about that? That would be good. I don't know. I broke it. That's what I know. The page, the 404 page is broken now. What did I do? No, it's just spacing or something like that. That's what I'm talking. Remember we talked about it just now. We just said it. You know, if we're going to, well, this is good. 404 not found, right? But it shouldn't take you this. It should actually take you to a custom 404 page, right? And it might be caching too. Caching is a nasty thing when it comes to stuff, right? So if I put some kind of page, how about this? If I put a page that you don't know, like this, if I say index.php and then question mark and then la 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 la, what will it do then? Well, it's going to do this, which is also not what we want, right? I want it to go so that if it's not found, right? Here's my dashboard because I'm logged in. Let's log out for a second. If it's not found and I try and do that stuff again, if I go la 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 la, it should redirect me not to there, right? It should put me to my 404. Because of my default case should catch me. Now here's another problem. I've got this other page thing going on, which I don't have, but this should totally work, and it worked before. But anyways, please turn it off when I'm talking about from debugging perspective. That's where I went with that. I'm going to check this on the another browser. How do I check this on another browser? Pull up something like Firefox. Also good to check. Do a localhost, right? Kind of go into your folder that you're looking at, and then see if it reacts the same way. Right? If it reacts the same way, right? If I try and do this and it takes me to a not found, right? And this is weird. Look at what this is doing, right? Testing in other browsers is kind of a requirement these days, right? Because you never know, well, this is wrong, but you never know how it works out. So this is something that I'm trying to get to, and I don't know what page it is. And that's what the default case should get. It's almost like an else. If not set, it goes to home, right? If it's not set. Else goes here, right? Else goes here. And then this is if it's not set, it goes to home, right? If it's not home, if it's not set. So is this page ID set? No, go home, right? Else, if the page ID is set, go here. Okay, cool. It's going to look to go here, but then I'm trying to route it somewhere else. So that's why it's not being caught. Like, for example, if I do something like something weird, right, where, I don't know, I put some other weird error in here, like I go index.php, where my page ID is equal to, my page, then I'll get this, right? But if I want to be caught by everything, right, then we've written something that's incorrect. Why? I'm checking to see if it's not set, right? So, okay, if it's not set, cool, right? But am I going home? Is this where I'm going? I'm assuming that it's just home that I'm going to, right? I'm going to go home first, right? And that's why it's going here to my index.php, because my index.php is going to handle that error, right? But what if it's some other error? Is there a way to handle that, right, on the back end? Can I redirect it to a page, a custom page, right, when I'm not going to index.php. I'm going to some other page. That's where it has a problem. That's where it's erroring out, right? So again, if you wanted to check that out, I'm not going to talk about this today, but if I want to say custom 404 page with PHP, right? Now, what they do is they use another way of doing it. I think they use the Htaccess. Yeah, they use the Htaccess page. So Htaccess, you guys don't have to know about it because we didn't talk about it, but the Htaccess page, what the heck? Oh, did they actually give you the solution, or is it just talking? This is just they're teaching you how to do it, and that's not what we want. Is that the same thing, DigitalOcean? Yeah. So in your Htaccess is found actually on the Apache side. So I'm not going to talk about too much about this, but one thing when I was talking to Rich about this too, I think one of the difficulties of this course is you're learning a bunch of stuff all at the same time, right? Like this is me. I don't know if you guys agree. So here's what you're learning at the beginning. I'm learning how to do PHP embedded in HTML. And then I'm also learning how to do MySQL, accessing MySQL. And then I'm also learning how to run a WAMP server, right? I'm learning how to do command line. I'm learning Git, right? These are all things you're learning all at the same time, right? And once I'm learning a technology all at the same time, it becomes that much more challenging to learn. It's almost like we have to separate PHP from MySQL from all this other stuff in order for you to get one piece at a time. So one of the pieces that we didn't, WAMP server or XAMPP, we have something called an Apache server, which is the web server that's running. And inside of here, we have some configuration files that we can actually access on the Apache side. It's not here, but you can actually have something called a .htaccess page, a file, right? Yeah.
So on the line, the host server, would that keep going on?
No, you actually can put it inside your files, right? Okay. So inside your site files, and let me show you what this is. So if I go and think about an Htaccess page, so let me just talk about this for a second. So if I say, oops, wrong one. If I go Htaccess, so .htaccess, and I'll say something like redirect, or if I want to do something to 404 page, right? That's not the right way. Is it the same one? Yeah. So this is the way you would do it. Now they're talking about logging into your panel and showing your files and everything else and uploading this file, right, physically. Now this Htaccess file, right, is something that you want to upload to your server, right? So where does the Htaccess file live? Just to see what that is, right? It's a configuration file for use on web servers running Apache only, right? And where do you implement it? You know, I think this is a good place to put it in. So how do I implement this thing? So this is one thing it can do. It can actually access things like 500 internal server errors and all this kind of stuff because it catches them if in case you have a problem, right? So where you have an error document 404 and then you redirect it to that particular thing. So where do you put this Htaccess file? Where is it, right? And that's the thing to add to listen to next, right? So if I was going to say, where do I put an Htaccess file? Right, where do I put it, right? And if you look at it, the answer is place admin specific rules in admin, Htaccess, place admin tool specific. This doesn't tell me a darn thing, right? It says, so where do I put it? Right here it says I have some settings which I want to use. Settings are for functionality at admin tool folder level, but I want to include some settings for the admin and / locations as well. So this leads me to believe that if you think about it like this, the Htaccess file, right, is inside of your root folder. Let's make that. So just because you're asking. Again, I'm not going to test you on this on the exam. This is just for extra learning since we're talking, okay? And if I get you to use it, it'll be already included in your files, one of those, right? So I'm going to go to the top of my code. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a new file. right? Which I'm going to call the .htaccess file. Okay. Yes. Now that I have a .htaccess file, notice that there's a special symbol for it, right? Because it's a special file. This file is hidden, right, from the web. You can't actually access a file. You can't look at it and go, show me your htaccess file. From the web, it's unavailable. It's one of those files that are available in the root of your folder that you can put special rules on. And now they've given some examples of where to put it, right? But we want to know how to use it. An example of this would be if we have an error document 404, right? Here's the error message. We want to redirect it to this file here, right? So let's just try this out. If we're just going to take this file the way it is, as is, error document 404, and we want to set it to this HTML file. So I'm going to copy this piece right here, go back, and put it into my document, just the way it is. Here's error document 404, file not found. We don't have a file not found, but however, we do have a views, right? We do have a views, right? Errors 404.php. So errors, right? And then slash 404.php. We do have that. So save. Let's see if that'll even work. Right? And again, there's sometimes you have to set some stuff up on the server in order for your htaccess file to work at all. All right, so let's try this out. So we're going to go localhost. There we go, and we'll go back to that file again that we were at, and we'll go down to this, and we'll put in some gobbledygook in here, and this should take us back. But in this case, it says, additionally, a 404 not found error was encountered while trying to use error document to handle the request. Let's say tried. So the request isn't found, cool. And then we're trying to find an error, this error document stuff. Okay, so htaccess, error document, right? Error document 404/404. Now I wonder if we can only make it an HTML file and not a PHP file. That might be also the option. And the reason for this is because this is before the server takes hold, right? So that might be the one of the reasons. Notice it's a .htaccess, right, that we want to put in. And I wonder if I was going to try this, some kind of message like what it's saying here, and if we're just going to respond this all together. And here's an example of that. Notice that they're using HTML for everything. Okay. Now I don't see any separation here, so that is interesting that they're going to do / and the root of the folder. And here's all the, this is a really good site actually. This is the bunch of different redirects for server errors and everything else, right? Okay, I like that. But error document is the wordage we want to use, 404. And if I was to go to, I'm just going to just try this out here, because let's see if we have anything else in here. No. All right, let's just for laughs, let's make another error document. Just curious, right? So I'm going to make a new file. So I'm making an HTML file this time. We'll call it a 404.html file. So a different file, and then sure, and we'll say that the error in the body of the document will be an H1 tag with 404, file not found. I'm just curious if this is the problem, right? So because it's an HTML document as opposed to a PHP document. You can have both because they're different extensions, right? So it's not a problem. All right, so cool. Let's go back to that htaccess file and redirect me back into my 404.html. If that's the problem. So save, go back out, go back to this page, refresh the page. Refresh the page, go by here, and I might have to restart the server actually in this case, because this is one of those cases where I'm accessing, I'm affecting the server itself, right? I'm just gonna restart all services here, because this lives beyond the server's reach, right? Cool. And if I put in some weird requests, Still not. So this doesn't work. Maybe you have to put them in the root of your folder. So let's move this out to the root somewhere, like over here. No, I meant over here. Yeah, okay. And we'll just say /404. There it is. Let's try that now and refresh. And not even that. So that's not the answer. So something else we're missing. And let's see if we can do one more Google, and then we'll stop. So example.htaccess file. There we go. Common uses, DigitalOcean, sure. One speed. Okay, this is for accessing directories. Yes, I like that part. But I want a whole, this is neat, for auth user file, for passwords and so on. This is neat. But do I need all this stuff? That's the question. Error document is good. So this is, we did this correct. But that's not what we want. I want actually an htaccess file. Hopefully this will be someplace where we won't have to, work so hard. I just want a code example. And by the way, guys, you can, instead of having me struggle here, you can actually go up and check this out. Allow override all. No, I don't want that part. That'll mess us completely up. Oh, check to see if it's enabled. Right. Okay, so let's check this out too. So maybe that's the problem. So let's go here, and we're going to enable htaccess or disable it through my Apache. And that would be under my modules. Sorry, just going to make sure that this is cool. So if I go to here, data modules on Apache. Well, how do I enable? You guys always ask me for questions that I haven't dealt with in a long time. Enable this. So I'll say enable .htaccess WAMP. Apache. It says step 2, select the rewrite module to enable htaccess for the locals. Okay, go. So rewrite module. Good. So go back to here. So Apache modules, rewrite module. So it's already been enabled. Yay. Okay, cool. So if I unclick it, I always try and test the negative case first. Now if I go back there and try this, it'll ignore that file altogether. It should ignore me, right? So if I just do this, if I refresh, it just should give me a regular 404. So I'll go back here. La la la, and also because of localhost, it might ignore me. So there, it even saw it. Additional 404 file. It shouldn't see that if it's disabled, which might just be my WAMP server. I wonder if I ran this on the something up online, whether it would like it or not. So if I go to local, which means I should try it up on GitHub. That's the next thing I want to try. So if I go to Apache and I go to my Apache modules. And I want to try and look at that rewrite module. So rewrite module was actually turned off. Now I'm turning it back on again. So let's just go back to this, which is over here. And okay, I did that. Rewrite module. After WAMP server will be restarted, rewrite module will enable. La 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 la. Great. Is to open HTTP and do it manually. But of course, we would never do that manually ever on WAMP server because it makes no sense. Htaccess WAMP server. Okay, so second, here's his file. Some changes and rewrite engine on. Basic test. Test.php. Yeah, we don't want that. So I know what they're trying to do there. Does it work? That's a good question. I like how they answered. Does HTTP actually works in WAMP local server, localhost? And of course, it might say no. Tried using it. Da, 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 da. Yes, it does. But default HTTP config has allow override none. Find that line in your HTTP config file and change to allow override all. See? Something weird like that. Okay, so that is in the HTTP conf file, which is, we talked about this. This is all configuration stuff that you guys don't need to know, but it's part of our setup, which is kind of crazy, right? And this is your configuration file for Apache, which looks crazy, but actually all these hashtags are comments. That's what they are, like before, right? So what we want to find here is that allow override. If it's true, I don't think there is something like that in the new Apache. Allow override all. If I do a file, oops, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. Control F is what I wanted. Allow override none. Allow override all. Let's see if that's right. One. All right, let's restart the server. Whenever you make file change like that to your Apache INI files or config files, you need to restart all services because you're changing the actual server itself. Yay. Back to this and refresh. No change. I love that. Let's go back and check it on another page, localhost. We'll go back to the thing, home. And we'll just try something else. Started file, refresh Firefox. Sure, I don't know what that means. Okay, we're going to stop because this is just, it's something local that I'm not doing right. Let's go back to the review, which is really what I wanted to handle here. No. So we'll leave this in place for now, and I'll fix it later. But when we look at our structure, you should know your structure very well, all right? So that means you should know things like what goes in controllers, right? You should know the logic only goes in controllers. There should be no HTML element in controllers at all, right? That's number one. You should know that your views, this views file or views folder has all of your main screens or HTML should be all in here with a bit of, I want to call it PHP hair on the top of the HTML head, right? And what I mean by that is if you look at your login page, here's your user's login, right? You can see that for the most part, it's HTML, and there's just a little bit of this PHP, which just redirects. That's all it's for. It's like, okay, well, if I'm logged in, cool, then, make sure that you include the user's controllers folder first, and then perform the login. Otherwise, don't. That's all it does. And there is no actual logic here, right? Could I make it so that there's no logic at the top? Yes, but then there's other problems with that, right? So just, that's why I've left it the way it is. Other questions you should know when you leave this course. Should you mix PHP with HTML files on your server? And the answer should be no. You should never mix them up. So you should be either one type of file, either HTML or PHP. If you want to start using a PHP server, everything on that server is PHP. Even the ones that are not, you don't use PHP, they're just pure HTML, make it PHP anyway, right? It's not going to hurt you. And the reason for this is because with PHP, there is no, there's nothing negative if you're using a PHP server. It's going and doing a round trip anyway. Remember that every time we have a PHP page, when we make a request that goes out and grabs something from the server and comes back, it's doing this round trip. We're making a request, we're getting back a response. That's what's happening over and over again, okay? Those things you should understand. Okay, last week we loaded Composer. I'm not going to have anything to do with Composer next week. However, if I ask you for if you want to get a bonus with email, right, you're going to have to know how to do that. Load it up, make sure SendGrid works. There's other strategies on how to get your vendor stuff working. That's fine. How about things like your Bower RC file? Do I care about how to set that up or anything like that? Probably not. Git ignore? Probably not. Your bower.json, composer.json, composer.lock, readme MD file, all those things I'm probably not going to ask you about because they're nothing to do with PHP, right? So for the most part, the things we've covered are the things that we're going to cover in class. How about a class, like for example, our games class, which we didn't really use. This idea of class with a constructor function, right? You should understand. Will I get you to do it though? Probably not, because we didn't spend a lot of time doing it. It's advanced PHP. If I had a second course, which would be advanced PHP, we would do Laravel the whole time, right? And then you're using classes and objects all the time, right? But in this case, you should understand that when you use the class keyword and you establish a class, which is a game in this case, right? I have a constructor function, which is, I use the _construct, right? That's how constructor functions work in PHP. This constructor function, just like everything else in other languages, is triggered when you create a new object of type game, in this case, okay? When would I use this? If I wanted to create or connect to a database with a certain structure, I can pass this whole object. I can create a new object of type game and pass it across from one form to another, as opposed to passing individual properties. Same thing with user. Here's my user.php. You can see that there's just the exact same thing, except I have 3 parts: username, password, and display name. We really didn't go into this, but when we make models, the model itself represents what the database is going to look like. And I want you to take that away, all right? So that's where, from a learning perspective, we're going to hit model, view, and controller again, guys, okay? This isn't the last time you're going to see it. You're going to see it in ASP.NET, COMP1007, when we do enterprise computing. And you're also going to see it when we hit COMP1068, when you guys do that, which is advanced web. All right, so this is later on. You're going to see this model, view, and controller structure again and again. It's a design pattern that's very common these days. Guys, that's it for my review. Anything for me? Are you good?
I'll have a question.
So really, at the end of the day, if I ask you for something like, for example, if I say something like, okay, I want you to do full CRUD. In your mind, right, I want you to think about, okay, I need to connect to the database. My database connection is already there for the exam. Cool, great. Next, step 2. I need to have some kind of forms to be able to do full CRUD. I have my forms because Tom gave them to me. He gave me all the HTML I require. That's good. That's step 2. Step 3, now that I have my forms, I need to modify them. And if I look at examples online on what to do, for example, if I look at my games example from lesson 12, I have my list. Here's my games list. This is a, it's kind of a list, my table. And is there a form here? No, but it allows me to do things like edit and delete through GET requests. That's what I can do here. I can also add new objects through the add button, again, through a GET request, right? So that's how I can do it this way. Now, when I actually do the edit, if I go to my details form, that's a form. And the processing happens with a post request, right? So that's the thing that happens. Now, notice that I'm using the routing to send me up to my, to use my games controller, right? If I go to my controllers, games, then my games controller does all the database access. It takes care of all that for me, right? And returns information back to the view. Okay, that's what it's really for. And that's it. From a user perspective, when it comes to authentication, you just need to know how to log in and log out. And my users, if you look at my users controller, one of the things we covered is the ability for us to hash a password, like I said. So please make sure you understand what we did with that little video we did from lynda.com, right? So remember when we did a registration for the first time, we used password hash. So if I go through here, So we create a password. So here's our, when we register, let me just pull this away for a second. And we get our information from our username and password, but then what we want to do is we want to hash the password before we send it off into the database, right? We also check to see if the username is unique, and if it is, then we send this password hash request off, where we take it and encrypt it, the password, and save it inside this new variable called hash password. So we take a clear text password, right? Whatever that is, pass it into the hash password method, and then it comes out, it spits out a hash password that we pass into the database. That's what happens. So you should know how to do that. So what's going to happen is you're going to get a file, guys. It's going to be incomplete. I may ask you to fix an error, a bug, all right? These are the kind of things you're going to have to expect on the exam. And that's it. How many tasks can I give you? Let's think about that. Let's be reasonable. I have an hour and a half, let's say, with all respect, right? An hour and a half is 90 minutes, right? 90 minutes, if I broke it up into 4 tasks, let's say. If I had 4 tasks for you to do in 90 minutes, how many minutes would you have to do for each task, roughly? 90 divided by 4, right? How many? How many minutes would you have? 4 tasks. How many? 22 and a half minutes, about 20 minutes. That means you have to work pretty darn quick. 20 minutes for a task, that means you have to know what you're doing, right? But if I give you 4 tasks to do, by the way, one of those tasks, your minutes, if you think about all the minutes you have, GitHub and putting it up on Azure or Heroku, that's one of your tasks. So how many real tasks do you have? 3. It means you have to put it up on GitHub and Heroku and do 3 things that I'm going to ask you to do. That's it. Beyond that, if it takes more than, those 22 and a half minutes each, which is the rest of the time, right? It's too hard. So I want you to think of that. There's not a lot that I can ask you to do next week. I'm probably going to ask you to do 3 or 4 different things. That's it. Or if I make a task really simple, something that's going to take 5 minutes, I may ask you to do some simple stuff. So there might be some easy stuff, some middle stuff, and some challenging stuff, and some bonus stuff. That's it. Okay, and that's how the exam is going to be structured. Okay, I don't want to talk anymore about the exam. We're done. If you have any questions, you can see me. I'm going to stop recording now, and I'll be here until 5 to answer questions. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next week. Please be early. Please be on time. If you come in late after half an hour, it'll be unavailable to you. And if you stay past an hour, if you don't finish within an hour, you're going to have to stay till the end. All right? Because otherwise, there's too much in and out. Okay? And we'll talk about that next week when I see you. All right.